Morgen, mein kleiner Lieblings. And now it's English because I'm too stupid to learn German. And there's lots of you, and I'm nervous, so I'm going foot naked. Yeah, I'm Bruce Lawson, and my talk is on how to make loveliness, which is what HTML stands for. It's an acronym for how to make loveliness. And this is an HTML treasure hunt. Who am I? I am one of the editors of the HTML specification in the W3C, which is the body that makes web standards. I was one of the committee having all the fun of making the British standard for commissioning accessible websites. Those are websites that people with all kinds of disabilities can use. And I co-wrote the first book on HTML5 and this book on web accessibility. And I'm really old. But I'll say it to you because you're friends. My name's Bruce, and I'm an HTML-alcoholic. This is a brand of clothing in Japan, actually, weirdly. So I had to lie down in the department store. But I love HTML. Because HTML, if you use it right, it has all kinds of treasure. This isn't a particularly technical talk. There's stuff here for designers, developers, hardcore JavaScript developers, people like me who started on Fortran and COBOL and ended up in PHP. There's stuff here for SEO types, and there's stuff here for managers, if you are a manager. Any suits in the house? Just wave your banknotes. But talking of money, HTML can give you a lot of rewards, but you have to know where to find them. So the treasure is, if you use just simple HTML, the simple stuff in the pointy brackets, your sites can be more performant, faster. And we all know that every second it takes for your site to load, you're losing business. Those people don't give up and not buy whatever it is. They just buy it from your competitor. It will make the web more accessible, so you are not locking out the 10 to 20% of people who have a disability. It's not just people who are blind, it's people like me, because I have multiple sclerosis, so sometimes I can't use my hands very well. You're making the web more robust. You're making your websites more robust. There's less to break. You are writing less code, and writing less code is kind of our job. Mark Twain memorably said, "I'm sorry that I wrote such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." Our job is to write less code. And if we write less code, we do less testing. And if we do less testing, we have more time in the pub or playing Call of Duty, seeing your kids, whatever it is you like to do, or if the manager's counting your money. So let's look at the treasure map, and let's look at how we can achieve this. Use HTML properly. I'm going to show you how. Write more HTML. Use CSS properly. Built-in beats bolt-on bigly. This means if you can use something that has stuff built in automatically, it's much better than you having to bolt it on, because you will forget. If things get lost in copy and pasting, somebody comes in after you and removes it because they don't understand it. I'm not scared of frameworks. I was in Bucharest and I saw this graffiti saying, "React to run," but I'm not scared. I was recently working on a CSS library for React with Wix. But these things, React, Angular, Ember, PHP, these are just tools. They are big, well-known tools, but nevertheless, they're just tools. If you want to use React, Ember, Angular, Bootstrap, Hubpack.js for your project, great. knock yourself out. Just make sure that the code this produces, the HTML that goes to the visitor's browser, is good. I like furniture. We have some furniture in England, you'll be surprised to learn. Soon after Brexit, we'll be burning it to keep ourselves warm. And this is the Bible of furniture making. Since its first publication in 1970, the technique of furniture making is the Bible for all woodworkers. In the introduction, they say, even in this age of machine-made furniture, the textbook must deal primarily with the basic handicrafts. If all the machine can ever do is translate the essential hand operations of rotary movements. If you are operating a machine that makes furniture, if you have had to saw that piece of wood by hand, you will likely know much more about it. You'll have greater respect for it, and you'll understand it in greater depth. And this is why the techniques of furniture making, the first 100 pages is not about furniture at all. It's about the moisture content of different wood. It's about which cut of the wood has different strength and tensile robustness. It's about the grain. It's about knowing the raw materials. And because I like furniture and I like noodles, I got interested in Japanese woodworking. There's an interesting bit in this book by Mr. Tashio Odate. The Japanese word shakunin is defined as craftsman or artisan, but such a literal description does not fully express the deeper meaning. Whoops. Oh, go back, you fool. Okay, whatever. All right, there's back, sorry. Knowing your tools. Shakunin means not only having technical skill, but implies an attitude and a social consciousness, a social obligation to do your best for the general welfare of the people. An obligation both spiritual and material. And I think we need to be shakunin of the web. You've heard of this guy. This is Sir Uncle Timbo, as I call him. But you can call him Tim Berners-Lee, and he invented the web. And he memorably said, this is for everyone at the opening of the London 2012 Olympics. And it was. This is the first ever web page. The first ever web page that Sir Uncle Timbo made. And this is it running in Chrome a month ago. And you will notice that it is completely responsive out of the box. It just works. I can tab with the keyboard because my MS means I can't use the mouse very well. And I can go link by link and I see where I am on the page. And if I click the link, it goes somewhere. The first ever web page, 25 or 30 years ago, was fully accessible, fully responsive. And we broke it. We broke the web. We developers and designers by choice or by ignorance, broke it. And we broke it because we insisted upon fixed width. In the old days, when everybody had a big monitor, we said everybody will have big, wide screens. So we had fixed width websites. We had bad contrast, bad fonts, bad colors. We insisted upon pixel perfect layout like it was print. We didn't have captions for videos. Or we deliberately broke the ability to use the keyboard to navigate a web page. And we removed the focus indicator. If you are evil, you can just say star, focus, outline, none, and you can make it so anybody tabbing through the page has no idea where they are. So you've broken that web page for me because I don't use a mouse. Thank you. We need to get back to not being obsessed by the tools. We need to get back to understanding the raw materials. And the raw materials of the web are JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS3, as symbolized by these handsome men. This is Brendan Eich, who invented JavaScript. This is me. I didn't invent HTML, but I did invent the picture element. And this is Halcombe William Lee, who invented CSS. There you have JavaScript, HTML, and CSS happily having a beer together. Not fighting. Well, not until the fifth pint, but Oh, I'm English, after all. But so it's possible for all these things to coexist in harmony. But some people don't understand this. This was on Medium a few months ago. I've taken the name of the author away because I don't want to name and shame. It's not about the one person who wrote this. It's about general malaise in our industry. 10 things to learn for becoming a solid, full-stack JavaScript developer. The top 4, he said, have a fundamental understanding of JavaScript. Okay, yeah. Of course, you can't do full-stack JavaScript development or full-stack any web development without learning JavaScript itself. Yeah, okay. Then a front-end framework. This is the second essential knowledge, Angular or React. You don't need that to make web development. Then Bootstrap 4, and then kind of as an afterthought, oh, you need to know HTML and CSS. He said, as for HTML, there's not much to learn right away, and you can kind of learn as you go. Just know the difference between span and div, and this will save you a huge amount of headache when fiddling with your CSS code. And this is part of the problem. Seeing the 2 foundational technologies of the web as kind of an afterthought. You can learn as you go along. It's fiddling about. So we're going to go back to my carpentry metaphor. We're going to learn about those raw materials. We're going to look at the wood. HTML is declarative. I say, give me a button, and the browser gives me a button. I don't need to know how the browser makes it focusable. I don't need to know how the browser is listening for a press or a click or somebody hitting enter. I just declare it to be so, and it is. HTML is fault-tolerant. The blink tag, which you should never use, was never implemented by Internet Explorer. But because HTML is fault-tolerant, when Internet Explorer saw this, okay, it didn't blink, but it would always show the content. It didn't crash out and show an error in the console. It just showed the content of a tag it didn't understand and continued. And this is a hugely powerful, because it meant that when we invented the video element, because HTML is fault-tolerant, browsers that understand the video ignored the stuff inside the tags. Browsers that had no idea what the video element did would show the stuff in the tag, and in this case, give me a link to download the video and use the operating system's built-in player. This meant that when you started using the video element from HTML5, if you did this, it worked for everybody. Everybody would have access to the video, at least. So when I invented the picture element for using for responsive images, this is what we did. If you are a browser that understands the WebP format, which is 30 or 40% smaller than JPEG for the same quality, if you understand the WebP format, show the WebP. If you don't understand the WebP, or you don't understand the picture element, just go back to the content in the middle, show me a JPEG, and everybody gets the images. Nobody gets a worse experience. This is super powerful. I showed you the first ever web page running in a modern browser. This is the first ever browser that Tim Berners-Lee wrote, and showing my WordPress blog. Okay, it's not the nicest experience. There we go, brucelawson.co.uk. Okay, it doesn't necessarily show me any pretty attractive CSS, but all the content is there. This is because HTML is so fault-tolerant that the first ever browser that only understands HTML1 can still show my HTML5 content. HTML is interoperable. If I open a B, I open an I, and I don't close them in the right order, it still works. Before HTML5, every browser would make a different DOM. That's the document object model that the browser actually works with. And that meant that JavaScripts were highly, highly fragile because every browser would make a different DOM. No browser was wrong because HTML4 only told you what to do with good markup. I know, looking at you, that everybody in this room never makes an error in their code, right? But we all have that loser in the office who does sometimes, yeah? But HTML5 defines exactly and totally how to make the same DOM across browsers with any combination of bad markup. It's like an HTML ninja. It's highly powerful, and nobody ever notices it. But that's why the web is more interoperable than ever before. JavaScript is not declarative. JavaScript is imperative. You have to tell it how to do things. And if it doesn't understand, it will break. Therefore, it's not fault-tolerant. And if the central functionality of your website requires JavaScript, it will break for some people. Tim Berners-Lee said when he invented the internet, use the principle of least power. The low power end of the scale is typically simpler to design, implement, and use. If you use the lowest power tool to do the job, it's easier for you to code, it's easier for test, and it's less likely to break under strange conditions. Maybe somebody is not getting JavaScript because they're behind a weird firewall. Maybe somebody's looking at your content on an old Nokia phone running Opera Mini in Bangladesh. There's all kinds of conditions which you can't predict. Use the principle of least power. Use the right tool for the job. 13 million requests for JavaScript will time out, said BuzzFeed. 1% of all requests for JavaScript on BuzzFeed time out. That's 13 million requests a month. This is not a problem that's happening in the emerging economies. BuzzFeed is read by people in Berlin and Birmingham, where I'm from. It's because you're in the underground or on the metro and the JavaScript doesn't load, or you're using public Wi-Fi on a train. Every one of us has experienced no JavaScript. My friend Stuart Langridge made this. Everybody has JavaScript, right? No. Each one of us has experienced no JavaScript sometime. Those taking photographs, I'm going to put the slides on the web later today so you can grab all the stats and shit and stuff. HTML gives you these freebies. This is a joke. Thank you. Freebies. Here's a demo. We've all seen this. Check if you don't want to not opt out of cancelling or stopping sending you spam forever. These two look identical. Well, actually, apart from the spacing here. The top one, I can only check it if I actually can focus into that little box. Look, here I am trying to click around, and I can't check into it. I have to be accurate there. The second one, I can click anywhere in the label and fill it, and it will check. This is really useful if, like me, you don't have good motor control. It's really useful if you are on a bumpy train with a small screen and you've got podgy little dev fingers trying to hit that little checkbox. How do we do this? We use proper HTML. The first one has an input type equals checkbox, and then the check if you don't want to not opt out is in a span. And a span has no meaning. It does nothing. The second one, I've simply put a label around the input, and I've got my stuff, and browsers for free, all browsers since 1995. If you click in the label, it will automatically check the checkbox. So useful, free for you, using built-in browser behavior. It just makes people's lives better, and it doesn't make your life worse. Because the way people who are blind or people who use assistive technologies work, excuse me, is they might use a screen reader. Your app in the browser makes a document object model, but it also makes an accessibility tree. It translates the things in the browser into things the operating system knows about, because every operating system has checkboxes, radio buttons. And then the screen reader talks to the accessibility tree, and that talks to the user. If you use the label, Oh, you're not waving at me for time. Good, sorry. Petra's like the boss, and they kick me and reduce my fee for every second I go over. If you use the accessibility tree, then you're giving information to a blind or disabled user. If you use it and the user isn't blind or disabled, it doesn't matter. It doesn't harm anybody. So your button. If you just use a div, as a lot of people do, and say, click me, okay, great. But you are also responsible for setting the ARIA role in our HTML or JavaScript. You're also responsible for making sure that you can focus with the keyboard, because divs are not focusable with a keyboard by default. And you're also responsible for listening for a key press, which is a spacebar or enter, and a touch. You have to do this if you don't want to use a button element. If you use a button element, you get all of this for free. Less to code, less to test, less to break. In the old days, we had this. Div ID equals header, main, article, div ID equals nav, div ID equals footer. This was great, but div has no meaning at all. In the specification, the div element has no special meaning at all. Authors are strongly encouraged to view the div element as an element of last resort for when no other element is appropriate. And for the last 10 years or so, we've had the header element, the main element for your main content, the nav element, and the footer element. Every assistive technology has a button that allows somebody to press one keystroke and they will jump straight to the navigation. Or one keystroke and they jump straight to the main content. Every assistive technology has this. And frankly, if you're writing div, why not write nav? And get all of this behavior for free with no harm to yourself. So when you go to the pub, you're going to the pub a bit earlier because you're writing less JavaScript, and you can buy yourself one extra beer to reward yourself for your service to humanity. Screen reader users were asked last year, if there are nav, main, header, footer, how often do you use them? 25% whenever they're present, 18% often, 28% sometimes. Only 13% said never. So if you use these things, you are helping, 70% of people at no cost to you and no impact for people who don't need these things. It's just free. I don't have time to show this, but yeah, I do. Okay, I asked my friend Leonie Watson, who is another editor of the HTML5 spec, but she is a designer who went blind in her 20s. And now she works educating people about accessibility and helping edit the HTML spec. And I asked her to look at some sites and show us how she used them with a screen reader. And I volunteered mine, not because I'm a great god and I know everything, but because I don't believe in naming and shaming. So, I offered mine. And this is what she found. And I tried to put captions on this, but something happened with the internet last night, but I'll caption it online. etc. This is vitally important for somebody who's an advanced web user and no cost to you. Does anybody here, does their boss ever say, please make the site less friendly to Google? Thought not. Clever bosses. There's also structured data. Google, we've known for a long time, if you add markup to your content, you help search engines understand different components of a page. And people like me have been saying, and this enhances user experience and gets you more traffic. Yeah, okay. But last month, Google published some numbers. Eventbrite saw a 100% increase in year-on-year growth traffic from the search. Job Rapido saw a 115% increase in organic traffic, 270% increase in new user registrations. You can read. This is from Google doing case studies implementing structured data in people's sites. If you use the HTML, you're getting this for free, and your boss will kiss you and make a 20-meter statue of you in the car park and light joss sticks every morning in your honor. Guaranteed. So how do I do this? Easy. I use HTML5. Each of my articles in my single.php, all I do in WordPress is I have an article element because it's an article. I give it some HTML microdata, which comes from schema.org. Schema is run by Google, Bing, Yandex, which is the biggest Russian search engine, and Baidu, which is the biggest Chinese search engine. There is a schema for almost everything. Medical research, recipes, football results. I'm using blog posting. And all I'm doing is giving an extra hint about this is a headline, it's the date, this date is the date created, it's the pub date, and it's the date published. This gets me all of those great numbers you saw for free. And also, it gets me a much better user experience on an iWatch. Is it called iWatch? Apple Watch, I don't know. Last year at the Apple Fest, they said that the new version of watchOS, they will show web content. But because the screen is so tiny, they use the HTML elements to work out how to display things. So if you use an article element, you get a nice display. If you use item prop, HTML5, subheading, pub date, and author, the watch knows how to display it. If you use the figure element, the fig caption, the watch knows how to display it. If you use input type equals tell, data, select, the watch gives a nice user experience for the punter. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, Bruce, you are a fashion icon. What's Bruce wearing today.tumblr.com is my fashion blog. You're welcome to, make yourself look better. But okay, I'm the first to admit that I'm not glamorous and I'm not beautiful. So if I'm not glamorous and not beautiful, how am I even allowed to own an Apple Watch, let alone be told by Apple earlier what they were going to do? Well, I didn't. I implemented that microdata 7 years ago when I was experimenting with HTML. I had no idea Apple were going to come up with a watch. But because I used the right markup, I had future-proofed my site for a device that I had no idea, no conception would ever exist. And making a website accessible to people with disabilities is an enhancement for people who do not have disabilities. These three people, whose names I cannot pronounce, Smith, and Smith, at the University of Switzerland, it's around here somewhere, they did some research with people who had no disabilities, and they asked them to use a very accessible site, a moderately accessible site, and an inaccessible site. 61 participants without disabilities used 3 different levels of accessibility. A high level of web accessibility led to better performance than low-level accessibility. High web accessibility improved user ratings, perceived usability, aesthetics, workload, etc. for all participants, even those who were disabled, not disabled. So this is evidence that making websites that work for people with disabilities makes it better for everyone. Yes, the University of Switzerland. It's kind of next door, I think, or something. Anyway, as my friend Jamie Knight, who's an autistic guy who works for the BBC, he says, no one comes to our sites disabled. They come with impairments, and we disable them, or we can choose to disable them, or we can choose not. Remember, where the fluffy bunny of good HTML goes, the Tweety bird of accessibility goes along for the ride. These were delicious, by the way. These are absolutely. Sir Uncle Timbo said, the web is for everyone, and collectively we hold the power to change it. It won't be easy, but if we dream a little and work a lot, we can get the web we want. What can you do? I know what you're asking. You're going to come up to me and say, Bruce, what can I do? You can learn the semantics of HTML. There are 120 elements, that's all. And most of them you will never use because they're weird. I used to be a kindergarten teacher in Thailand. Most 2-year-olds can say 100 words in their native language. By the time your toddler is 2.5, she'll know close to 300. That's twice the size of the vocabulary of HTML. Be better than this. This was delicious, by the way. So learn the semantics of HTML. Run automated tests that go for the low-hanging fruit, e.g. color contrast. An organization called WebAIM looked at the top 1 million home pages on the list of top websites. They looked at the top 1 million home pages. 98% had an accessibility problem. But the most common one was simply bad contrast, low contrast. Designers, I know that very thin fonts in light gray on a white background are fucking beautiful, but I'm 100 years old, I can't read them. So what I do is I downloaded this free thing from Ada Canon, and it goes through my site and it highlights where there's bad contrast, and then I fixed it. It took me 5 minutes. You can use HTML and CSS wherever possible. You can make sites that work without JavaScript, then enhance them with JavaScript. Choose your libraries carefully. If you're using React components, 10 on UI is Bruce approved. It is perfectly accessible. Just take it and go. It's BSD, BDSM, whatever. Whereas react-bootstrap, a very popular library, they have a navigation thing, but it's just a div. Why no nav? Bruce rejected. And just use less JavaScript. We cannot continue to bloat the web with JavaScript. The median mobile site at the end of last year sends 385K of JavaScript. And we cannot do this because it makes our lives easier, because we are taxing the poorest users. In Germany, you work for 1 hour to afford 500 megabytes of mobile data. In the US, you work for 6 hours. In Brazil, you work for 35 hours to afford that. So if you're vomiting down loads of JavaScript to make your life better, you're making somebody in Brazil work harder, and that, my friends, is naughty. In Nigeria, the data required to watch just 2 minutes of online video a day is more expensive than sending your child to school. I know your hero image and your hero video of your boss looking over your office full of ping pong tables is marvelous, but it's not more marvelous than sending a kid to school. Your React app will never load faster than 1 second on a phone in India. Your Angular app will always take 2.7 seconds to boot up because you're vomiting loads of JavaScript across the network, and then the phone is having to decode it, parse it, execute it. There are 1 billion people in the world like us with high-speed internet. There are 7 billion people within mobile coverage. There are 4 billion people who could be on the web who are not yet on the web. And they are not in the West. By 2100, the year 2100, 50% of the world will live in these 10 countries, and only one of them is what we call developed. But these people are full of a burgeoning middle class. They are young countries, people who are internet savvy, people with ever more disposable income, who want to buy your goods and services if you don't tell them they can't come to your website. Developing countries are home to 94% of the global offline population. The World Bank said making the internet affordable is a global priority because there are people in sub-Saharan Africa who have miles to walk to see a doctor, but a feature phone, access to the web, and a copy of Where There Is No Doctor is, for millions of people, first-line medical care. There are people in Bangladesh and Nepal and Sudan for whom school textbooks are an unaffordable luxury. But a feature phone, access to the web, and the marvelous charity World Reader brings tens of thousands of textbooks to people in their native language for free. There are people in the world who live in horrible regimes where having the wrong opinion, the wrong religion, or loving the wrong gender of person can get you killed. And their access to the outside world comes through the internet. As an Egyptian internet activist said, if you want to liberate a country, give them the internet. Do not block them out. If that's enough hippie bullshit for you, I'm sorry. A big management consultancy said an increase in internet maturity similar to the one that we've had in the last 5 years creates an increase in real gross domestic product per person of $500 in 5 years. It took the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century 50 years to do that. So be a web superhero. Again, my fashion blog will show you more. Because the internet is not about computers. The web is not clouds. The web is these women in an African village. The web is this blind guy in Toronto. The web are these ladies I met on a bus in Bangladesh. It is this lady on the streets in Taipei. The web is this farmer and his granddaughter I met when I was in Cambodia. The web is this guy on the metro in New York. It's for everybody. Thank you for your time.